Each week at this time we do something we call a community moment, where someone from the Oasis community gets up and shares kind of a thought for the day. It might be something about your journey to free thought, something from your life, maybe something about a book you read. This week, our community moment presenter is our awesome sound engineer, who is the creator of the Houston Oasis podcast, which, if you haven't listened to it, it's phenomenal what he does. Let's give a warm welcome to Jesse Hudgens.
A fireman, a professional wrestler, and a video game tester. I promise this is not the start of a bad joke. Right? These are the things that I wanted to do when I was a kid. In college, started out with a business degree, quickly transferred to youth ministry because I thought that I had a calling from the Lord. Obviously, I'm talking to you and my boyfriend's sitting over there, so that didn't work out. And I finished my degree in broadcast journalism because I wanted to be a news reporter. Breaking news, I'm not currently a news reporter. I've always been obsessed with finding my passion, but the problem is, for a long time, I thought that my passion had to come through my work. So I want to talk to you for a few minutes today about how humans can express our passions in ways beyond the workplace, and how churches and secular communities can help us create environments for that. Fred gave a community moment actually a few weeks ago that helped inspire me, and if you remember, he talked about Martin Seligman, who is one of the forefathers of the positive psychology movement, and actually did a lot of studies on happiness, and he broke it down into kind of three distinct ways of life. We can all live these concurrently, but they're basically different paths to happiness, and some are better or worse compared to Seligman. One way is the pleasurable life, right? This is the idea that you're always eating great food and your house is awesome and you get to go on a lot of vacations and have great experiences. Not necessarily a bad thing, right? The hedonic treadmill, not necessarily a bad thing. That can actually lead to some happiness. But according to Seligman, there were better ways. The next way, the good life, right? This is finding our signature strength and applying it more and more in our lives. The last step, the highest point, the meaningful life. What this was, and there's a key difference here, is it's similar to the good life in the sense that you're finding your signature strength, but you're applying it in the service of something that's larger than you are. One of the obstacles, though, of living this meaningful life, or even really this good life, is that for a long time, for me at least, I thought my passion had to come through my job. And it makes sense. In fact, if you think about it, you're going to spend most of your time at your job. Right? When you die, you're going to look back over your life and either sadly or happily, depending on if you like your job or not, are going to think about the fact that for most of your waking hours, you spent your time at work. So there it is. Your passion has to come through your work. Not so fast, right? Here's a few problems with that. One is that not everyone has one passion, right? There are multi-passionate people who like different things and have different strengths. And for many of us, except for really kind of extreme cases, we can't really rely on our work alone to fulfill all of the passions that we have. We're just too curious as a species, as a people. Another problem is that our job has to mesh with certain life values. And this was huge for me, right? So when I decided I wanted to do broadcast journalism, I entered into my first class all excited and bright-eyed about my future when my first teacher told me, if you don't love this, get out. And for me, I thought about things like this. I didn't want to travel. Why did I do this? I think back on this now and I think I was nuts. I didn't want to travel. I didn't want to be on call 24 hours a day. I didn't want the salary, which is really, really terrible. You see them on TVs. They don't make a lot of money, right? Maybe like Anderson Cooper or Wolf Blitzer or something like that, but most of them don't make a lot of money. There's more than that I want from my life. So I'm sure there's other issues that we can find with this insistence that your job has to fulfill all of your passions. But the more pressing matter is that if our jobs don't fulfill or can't fulfill all of our passions, there's kind of a vacuum we're left with, right? Where are we going to go to live this, apply our passions, not just to live this good life, but also this meaningful life. And for me, looking back, I realized it was always the church, right? I grew up as a Christian. I wasn't a professional reporter, but I got to speak to the congregation on Sundays. I wasn't a professional DJ, but I got to help run sound. I wasn't a professional youth minister, but they let me work with kids and with youth. Growing up in the church allowed me to test and cultivate passions that helped me live a richer life. And for many Christians, a lot of times this is packaged in the idea of like spiritual gifts. And, of course there's like spiritual gifts like speaking in tongues and stuff like that. But when I would talk to most of my fellow Christians, a lot of times it would simply be, if you kind of just remove the spiritual component, it would just be things we like to do, things we like to share and to give back to the community. Well, Houston Oasis provides the same environment, right? But the added benefit is we can leave behind a lot of the messier elements, such as the dogma and stuff like that. The idea of sharing our talents with each other is an idea that's not rooted in Scripture, right? We know that that's something that's rooted in evolution of human tribes and the idea that we work better together. So how do gatherings such as my old church and Oasis help promote human flourishing? Well, one way is that churches and secular gatherings allow you to test out different interests. When I was growing up in the church, if I wanted to try singing, I did. And guess what? They let me try. And I was terrible. But they let me try. Singing was not one of my spiritual gifts. Oasis is a place for that, right? There are things that we have always wanted to try, but we're too afraid, or they're impractical to pursue as a job because we don't have the experience. I once heard someone say the problem isn't coming up with ideas about the things we like to do, but being unwilling to test those ideas. Well, this is a place where we can test those ideas and do it in the context of a compassionate community. Because for many of us, trying something out for the first time, we're going to need a lot of compassion. As a quick aside, I had a history professor once who told me as he got older, he began enjoying pursuing his passions more. And the reason was because when you're young, you're all caught up in like being perfectionistic and stuff. But for him, he wanted to learn guitar. So he just went out and bought one. He went out on his porch, he smoked a cigar every night, he learned a few chords, and he just enjoyed the process. And that's really key, is that this is a place where you can enjoy the process of learning something, trying something new. Most important though, church and secular gatherings help us go beyond the good life to the meaningful life. So we can blog at home, we can take pictures and post them on Facebook. And sometimes that's okay, that there are things that we enjoy intrinsically. Right? Some of us just enjoy painting in a room alone, and if no one ever sees it, that's great. But for some of us, some of those activities can feel kind of empty. And the example I gave to Scott when I was thinking about this was like, at my job, I create advertisements because I get to help the company kind of spread the message. And if I was just to sit at home and just create advertisements all the time, it wouldn't really be going towards something. And I think we kind of miss out on that meaningful life that Seligman talked about. At churches, this something larger is usually the faith or converting more people. I found countless testimonials online as I was kind of preparing this of people who talked about the reason they like to serve was because they got to spread the gospel. But at Oasis, the something larger is the power of community, right? Humanity is enough of a reason. We give back because we see value in what we're doing here. I want to take it a step farther, though. I'm being too fair to my old church. I thought about a few ways that secular gatherings and progressive churches can help move beyond what a lot of conservative churches can offer. One is that there is no limit on what your passion can be here, right? No one is telling you to stay away from science because it could lead you to trouble. No one's turning up their noses if you want to volunteer at the Gay Pride Parade. In fact, we do that as an organization, which is pretty cool. One of the Christian churches I used to attend was actually fortunate enough to realize that something missing from their churches was artists. A lot of the churches in this particular denomination did not value the arts. And so once a quarter, they opened up their space for an art show. And they would invite artists in from the community, and that was kind of their way of reaching back out to the artists. Progressive churches, secular gatherings, we love art, right? If art is not at the center of what we're doing here, we're doing something wrong, because art is one of the best ways that we can celebrate the human experience. Here's another thought. Secular people get to redirect their energies toward religious practices or God toward our passions. We don't have to worry about being distracted away from nobler pursuits because we realize that taking the risk to follow our passion is one of the noblest things we can do. Finally, one way that progressive churches and secular gatherings go above and beyond is that everyone is welcome to participate. No one is turned away. If you're a man, woman, liberal, conservative, straight, or gay, you can not only pursue your passions here, but you're encouraged to do so. The reason I got to do those things growing up at my church was because I'm a man, and I come from a denomination that is still struggling with women's roles. And most of their churches do not allow women to speak from the pulpit. This is shameful. And I'm proud to say here at Houston Oasis, you're allowed to participate because you're a human being, and that's good enough for us. So to close, we don't get to do all the things we want to do at our job. And sometimes we don't want the thing we love to be our job. But here's what we can do. We can live a more meaningful life through this community. We can play music, we can speak, we can take out the trash if you ever want to be a trash man. We can work with children and youth. I wanted to be a news reporter. I'm not, but as Mike mentioned a few months ago, I got to help us start a podcast, which is pretty cool. I'll talk about that, I think, in a future community moment and go a little bit more into that. Dr. Andrews started a list of talents that was going around last year and I think still exists maybe somewhere. We have different committees that we can serve on, right? There's different ways that we can get involved. So here's our New Year's resolution. Think about the ways to get involved here. If you read the comments on many articles about secular gatherings or atheist churches, you'll find those who say communities like Oasis are the death of the individual, that it promotes groupthink and conformity, that it undoes the work of leaving the church in the first place, right? But if you talk to people who get involved in these communities, you realize the opposite is true. Oasis is not the death of the individual, but is a community for us to self-actualize, to become better individuals, and to live more meaningful lives by pursuing our passions in the service of something greater than ourselves. And that, my friends, is each other. Thanks.